At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's Chikondi. Let's begin.
The official, recorded, and final answer is no.
The words echoed in the sterile chamber, each syllable a perfectly polished stone dropped into a silent pool. High Archivist Ozimian, a curator whose species had forgotten the concept of haste centuries ago, looked down from his dais. His long, placid face, smooth as worn marble, held a distant, academic approximation of pity. Before him, Ambassador Anya Koslov stood ramrod straight, her diplomatic composure the only armor she had against the crushing weight of galactic indifference.
We have watched your species rage in its crib for millennia, Ambassador.
Ozimian continued, his voice as smooth as poured glass.
You are loud, you are messy, you are prolific, but you are unready to walk among adults. The Galactic Library is a sanctuary of curated thought, a place far removed from a daycare for a species that still thinks shouting is a valid form of debate. Your petition for cultural access is, once again, denied.
The gate of woven light behind him pulsed once, a soft final hum more dismissive than any slammed door. Anya Koslov didn't flinch. She gave a curt, precise nod, turned on her heel, and walked away, the click of her boots on the polished floor the only sound of defiance she allowed herself. Her jaw was a tight, aching line, a physical manifestation of the fury she refused to show. Each step was a measured act of control, a refusal to break into a run, a refusal to grant the curator the satisfaction of seeing her composure crack. The grand hall was designed to intimidate, to make one feel small and insignificant, and for the first time in her career, she felt the intended effect like a physical pressure on her chest. The inside of the freighter, the paper cut, smelled of overstressed circuitry, recycled air, and cheap synth coffee. Gavin Victor, a man whose knuckles were more scar tissue than skin, racked the slide on a kinetic slug thrower. The sound was a metallic benediction, a sharp, clean chunk that he understood better than any sermon.
Fights are won before the first shot,
he muttered to himself, a mantra from 100 forgotten battlefields on worlds whose names were now just classified reports.
Are you sure you want to go with the Mark 12?
A voice crackled from a nearby console.
The recoil on that thing could knock a moon out of orbit. You're not getting any younger, Gramps.
Gavin grunted, not looking up from sighting down the weapon's iron sights.
Lasers are for light shows, Jet. When I shoot something, I want it to feel personally insulted.
Jenna Jet Riley, whose hands moved with deliberate purpose across a holographic flight control panel, rerouting auxiliary power through a flickering junction, grinned.
Just try not to shoot any of my ship. She's sensitive.
From the corner, hunched over a flickering datapad and surrounded by a fortress of empty caffeine bulbs, Marco de Vries snorted.
If you coded the nav computer half as well as you complain, we wouldn't keep getting directions in iambic pentameter, Marco muttered. The last jump calculation came out as a sonnet about the great dark's cruel mistress. It was beautiful, but entirely unhelpful.
Hey, Shakespeare knew his way around the cosmos, Jet shot back. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate than that black hole we almost scraped our paint on.
A heavy glare from Gavin silenced them both. It was a look he had perfected over decades, a quiet tightening of the eyes that conveyed more than any shout. The hiss of the ship's internal hatch broke the quiet. Ambassador Koslov stepped aboard, her face a rigid mask. The tight set of her jaw and the white-knuckle grip she had on her briefcase told them everything. She took in the cluttered cockpit, her expression one of profound disappointment.
It's done, she said, her voice tight. They said no.
She took a deep breath, the sound of it thin and sharp in the small space.
Ozimian reminded me that the library is sacrosanct. and that the Archivist Order is granted full authority over the compact defense fleet to protect it. His words presented it as an immutable fact, a threat wrapped in the language of law.
Gavin holstered his rifle. Diplomacy failed. Good. I hate paperwork. He looked at the others. Jet's grin was sharp and eager. Marco cracked his knuckles, a series of pops echoing in the quiet. All right, Gavin said, his voice a low rumble. Plan B it is. Let's go rob a library. The paper cut was an ugly ship. It was a cobbled-together mess of mismatched parts, welded plates, and an engine that sounded like a rock slide, which was precisely why it was perfect.
Coming up on the first sensor grid,
Jet announced, her hands moving across the controls, not in a blur, but in a series of swift, specific actions. Her left hand keyed in a code that masked their thermal output, while her right adjusted the alignment of the grav dampers to create a chaotic, unpredictable wake.
They're looking for clean energy signatures, EM shielding, standard grav drives, anything that sounds like a ship trying to be quiet.
She patted the console affectionately.
We, on the other hand, are a different kind of stealth.
We're a flying trash fire, Marco rumbled from his station, where he was feeding the library's security network a stream of garbled ghost data.
Exactly,
Jet chirped.
Her energy signature is such a chaotic mess of overlapping frequencies, she registers on deep-range scans as a minor solar flare. We hide in plain sight by being too loud to hear.
She killed the main drive, letting their momentum carry them.
Going dark.
The ship fell silent, coasting through the blackness between stars. Outside, a web of faint blue light crisscrossed the deep, starless gulf, the library's automated defenses. Jet navigated the gaps with the instinct of a bird riding a hurricane.
Easy does it, girl,
she whispered to the ship.
Just a little farther.
In the cargo bay, the airlock door slid open, revealing the star-dusted infinity beyond. Gavin, Marco, and Dr. Alistair Fosters, a man who looked like he'd be more at home in a dusty university office, clipped their tethers to the hull. Fosters, despite the bulky zero-G suit, clutched a datapad to his chest as if it were a holy text.
The schematics I acquired from a disgruntled archivist acolyte show a maintenance shaft on the underbelly,
Fosters said, his voice tinny over the comms.
Sector Gamma 9. It was sealed 3 centuries ago after a sanitation drone malfunction. They never bothered to upgrade its security.
He paused, a bitter edge to his voice.
To the curators, curation is a total discipline. They study every aspect of a culture, its art, its science, and its methods of violence with the same obsessive detail. But they're arrogant. They'd never imagine anyone would break in through the servant's entrance.
Ride's a hell of a blind spot, Gavin grunted. His magnetic boots clanked onto the hull, his movements fluid and sure, a man who had spent too much of his life in a vacuum. He moved without wasted motion, his center of gravity always perfectly aligned. They traversed the massive, silent curve of the library's exterior. It was less a building and more a celestial body, a moon carved from obsidian and light, so black it seemed to drink the starlight around it. Sleek white guard drones, silent as ghosts, patrolled their designated routes. One drifted closer, its single red optic sweeping across the hull. The 3 humans froze, becoming just another piece of space debris against the vast metal landscape.
Don't breathe,
Marco whispered.
We're in vacuum suits, you idiot,
Gavin growled back. The drone paused, its sensor lingering on their position. An eternity seemed to pass in that single, silent moment. Then, with a faint, unheard pulse from its maneuvering thrusters, it moved on. The collective exhale was a gust of static over the comms. They reached the shaft, a simple, unadorned circle of metal, barely visible against the dark hull. As Marco began working on the external panel, a chime sounded in their helmets.
Guys?
Jet's voice was a little too casual.
We've got company. A couple of those white lipstick cases are making a beeline for your position.
Gavin didn't hesitate. He unslung his rifle.
Fosters, stay behind me. Marco, how are we doing? Almost there. It's an old school compression lock. Just need to.
A drone zipped into view, its weapon port glowing with malevolent red light. Gavin fired. The kinetic slug, unhindered by atmosphere, slammed into the drone with the force of a meteor. The machine didn't explode. It simply shattered into a cloud of silent, glittering fragments that tumbled away into the black. The second drone opened fire, spitting needles of coherent light. Gavin grunted as one seared a line across his suit's pauldron, the material bubbling and smoking. He returned fire, a 3-round burst that stitched a line across the drone's chassis and sent it tumbling end over end into the deep. "Open!" Marco yelled, and the maintenance hatch hissed inward. They scrambled inside, Gavin pulling the heavy door shut just as another volley of laser fire stitched across its surface, leaving a pattern of glowing scars. The inside of the shaft was a cramped zero-gravity maze of conduits and forgotten support beams, thick with the dust of centuries. Dr. Fosters, now in his element, consulted his datapad, its light illuminating his face.
This way. The structural supports lead directly to the sub-archives, specifically to the restricted collection.
He guided them through the darkness, his voice filled with the breathless excitement that bordered on mania. For 40 years, Alistair Fosters had been a pariah. His theories that countless alien cultures displayed literary, philosophical, and even technological parallels to Earth history that were statistically beyond coincidence had seen him stripped of his tenure and ridiculed out of academia. The curators themselves had orchestrated the same smear campaign, branding him a madman. This was his vindication. They emerged into a cavernous, silent corridor. The air was cold and smelled of old paper and the faint, sterile scent of preservation fields. The walls were lined with data conduits that pulsed with a soft internal light. At the end of the hall was a single, immense door of brushed metal. Engraved upon it was a designation that made Foster's breath catch. Specimen Terra 001. Quarantine. Marco floated up to the locking mechanism, a complex array of interlocking rings and pressure plates. He ran a diagnostic scanner over it.
Okay, what we have got here, it looks like a chronosynclastic lock. No, wait, that's just pompous nonsense. There's no power source.
He leaned in closer, his gloved fingers tracing the patterns.
The arrogant bastards, he breathed, a slow grin spreading across his face. It's mechanical. It's a logic puzzle based on prime numbers, a physical manifestation of the Riemann hypothesis. They thought we'd forgotten how to think with our hands.
He began to manipulate the rings, pushing and turning them in a sequence that was both complex and elegant.
Big mistake.
With a series of deep, resonant clicks that echoed in the silent hall, the vault door swung open. The room beyond was a shrine. Pedestals held objects under soft, sterile light, a beautifully bound copy of the Quran, a silver data slate displaying the elegant equations of Einstein's theory of relativity. Fosters drifted toward one display, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet.
My God,
he whispered, his voice cracking.
That's a replica of the Voynich manuscript. I wrote my doctoral thesis arguing it represented a genuine artifact of a lost human language. They called me a fool. They ruined my career over it.
He reached out a trembling hand, stopping just short of the containment field.
And here it is, labeled Source Code, Aurelian Chant Language.
The real prize, however, was the central server stack, a pillar of black crystal humming with unimaginable amounts of data. Marco plugged his custom interface directly into the port, his eyes glazed over as code streamed across his vision.
Mother of God, he whispered. The whole thing, everything is here. Every book ever written, every song ever composed, every film ever shot.
He gritted his teeth.
I can't grab the whole archive. It's petabytes. The transfer would take a week. But I'm getting the master index, the librarian's cheat sheet, the catalog that lists every item, its original source, and its rebranded designation.
As the index downloaded, a progress bar crawling across his display, he started pulling samples.
And a few greatest hits.
A file appeared on Dr. Foster's datapad.
The Hesperian Cantos,
Foster's read aloud, his voice trembling. It was the epic poem that had formed the foundation of the Hesperian Empire's warrior culture, their most sacred text. He scrolled down, his eyes widening. He began to speak, his voice gaining strength and cadence, the words flowing from a place of deep memory. Marco stared at him. "What is that? Is that Earth language?"
It's ancient Greek, Fosters whispered, tears streaming down his face. It's the opening line of Homer's Odyssey.
He looked from the datapad to Gavin, his expression one of shattering, triumphant revelation.
Gavin, it's all of it. Everything. The foundational legal texts of the Arcadian Imperium. It's the Code of Hammurabi. The spiritual mantras of the Aurelian Ascendancy. It's the Bhagavad Gita. The glorious origin story of the curator's own people. It's Gilgamesh.
He looked around the vault, at the stolen legacy of an entire species, repackaged and sold to 1,000 worlds.
They didn't just deny us entry, he breathed. They built the entire library with our books.
The download progress bar hit 100%. A moment later, a soft, almost pleasant chime echoed through the vault. On Marco's screen, a single line of text appeared in stark red letters. Failsafe Protocol 3 activated. Archive sanitization in progress. "Oh," Marco said, his voice suddenly very small. His eyes widened in panic.
"Oh, that's bad. That is monumentally bad. That's the local data wipe procedure. A thermic purge. They're going to flash incinerate this entire data wing. The system says we have 5 minutes before this whole section is vaporized. We have to go now!"
On the bridge of the library, a vast star-swept chamber where Ozimian presided over the flow of galactic knowledge, a crimson alert bathed his face in an angry light. His calm demeanor finally broke, replaced by a cold, precise fury. He had spent centuries curating this grand, beautiful lie. Now the contamination was inside the sanctuary. He pressed a single rune on his command console, initiating the purge. Then he pressed another. Across the station, his elite warrior monks, the Justicars, moved with terrifying purpose. Ozimian's voice was a blade of ice over their private comms channel.
"The intruders are in Sector Gamma 9. They have triggered the failsafe. They will not escape the purge. But on the chance they do, find them. Sanitize the contamination. Leave no survivors."
"Move!"
Gavin roared, shoving Marco and Fosters toward the door.
"Jet, get ready to leave yesterday. We've got less than 5 minutes before this place becomes a furnace."
Already on it,
Her voice crackled back.
but you've got Justicar gunships crawling all over my hull. Get back here before they use me for target practice.
They scrambled back through the maintenance tunnels, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them, the hiss of plasma cutters and the whine of Justicar rifles. Behind them, they could feel a deep hum building, the vibration of immense power charging up. They spilled out of the hatch and onto the hull of the paper cut just as 2 sleek black Justicar ships swooped in, their cannons glowing.
Get inside!
Jet screamed over the external speakers. They threw themselves through the airlock as the ship lurched violently. Laser fire scored deep molten trenches across the freighter's already scarred plating. Gavin slammed the airlock shut.
"Go!"
The paper cut's engines roared to life, not with a clean hum, but with the raw, untamed fury of a controlled explosion. The ship shot forward just as a wave of incandescent white energy erupted from the maintenance shaft they had just exited, vaporizing a pursuing Justicar ship that was too close. Jet cackled, throwing the ship into a gut-wrenching barrel roll through the colossal superstructure of the library itself. Towers of data and spires of knowledge became a deadly obstacle course.
Shaking the dice now,
She yelled, a manic grin plastered on her face.
"They're locking on!"
Marco yelled from his console.
let 'em try.
Jet shot back. She scraped the ship's belly along a kilometer-long buttress, the shriek of protesting metal screaming through the hull, using the structure as cover from a missile volley. She dove through the center of a massive spinning habitation ring, the G-forces pinning them all to their seats, turning their blood to lead. A Justicar ship, trying to follow, misjudged the rotation and was atomized against the ring's superstructure in a silent, brilliant flash.
One down.
Jet cheered.
"We can't outrun them all,"
Gavin yelled, strapping himself into a chair.
Who said anything about outrunning?
Jet grinned, her eyes fixed on the main reactor spire at the library's heart.
Just need to get messy.
She angled the ship directly at the spire. Alarms blared across the cockpit.
Jet, that's a contained star!
Foster's shrieked.
Yeah, and it throws off one hell of an energy signature,
She replied. She flew straight at it, pulling up at the last possible second, skimming the edge of its containment field. The blast of energy and radiation washed over them, shorting out half the ship's systems, but completely blinding the sensors of the pursuing ships. By the time the Justicars recovered, the paper cut was gone, a ghost that had vanished into the blinding light of a stolen sun. They found refuge at Tortuga Port, a hollowed-out asteroid that catered to the kind of people who didn't like to answer questions. Its neon-drenched corridors stank of spilled liquor, alien sweat, and desperation. In a grimy, secluded docking bay, the crew of the paper cut huddled around Marco's console, the stolen master index projected between them. The scale of the deception was staggering. The glorious hymns of the avians, re-lyricized sea shanties, the intricate political theory of the Granthon Republic, Machiavelli's The Prince, with a few names changed. The starship designs that had won the Silixian War, Leonardo da Vinci's sketches run through an advanced engineering program.
It's like the myth of Prometheus,
Foster's murmured, his face pale in the holographic light.
We always thought the gods were angry that he stole fire for humanity, but this suggests they were terrified he had taught them how to make it for themselves.
He looked at Gavin.
They didn't quarantine us to protect us. They quarantined us to protect their monopoly.
Koslov, who had maintained a stoic silence for most of the flight, finally spoke.
This changes everything. Every treaty, every trade agreement, every declaration of war for the last 5,000 years has been based on this lie.
She traced a line of data with her finger.
The Codex Accords, the bedrock of galactic law. The species who creates a work holds ultimate cultural sovereignty. If this data is proven authentic,
humanity owns the galaxy, Marco finished, a slow, dangerous grin spreading across his face. Later, in a cantina that made the Mos Eisley bar look like a 5-star resort, the tension finally broke. Gavin was nursing a glass of something that smelled like industrial solvent when a hulking alien swaggered over to their table. Its 2 lower arms, thick as tree trunks, were crossed over its broad chest, while its 2 upper arms, thinner and more dexterous, fiddled with a series of clicking metallic beads. He loomed over them, his shadow falling across their drinks.
Humans,
the alien rumbled, his voice a dry rasp like sandpaper on bone.
Heard you were the galaxy's new favorite joke. Primitive, pathetic. All you're good for is breeding fast and dying young.
He gestured at Gavin's glass with one of his upper hands.
Can't even hold your liquor.
Gavin didn't look up.
Funny, I was just thinking the same thing about your species. Read a book about you guys, actually. All brawn, no brain. Can't even invent your own insults.
The alien's face darkened.
You want to see brawn?
Gavin finally looked up, his eyes flat and cold.
No, but you are about to see mean.
The alien threw a punch with its lower left arm, a blow that could dent bulkhead plating. Gavin didn't try to block it. He ducked under it, grabbed the heavy chair he was sitting on, and slammed it into the alien's knees. All 4 of them buckled with a sickening crunch. As the brute roared and staggered, Jet was already in motion, vaulting over the table and smashing a bottle of neon green liquor over its head. Marco, surprisingly, kicked the alien's feet out from under it, sending the Goliath crashing to the floor. The entire cantina went silent. The alien lay groaning, a mess of broken limbs and shattered pride. Gavin stood over him, dusting off his hands.
See, he said to the stunned room. They might be stronger, but we're more creative.
He tossed a few credits on the bar.
Sorry about the mess.
The brawl had drawn attention. A day later, as they were trying to slip out of the system, a sleek bounty hunter vessel dropped out of FTL right on top of them. It was a top-of-the-line pursuit craft, bristling with weapons.
That's the Silent Strike!
Jet hissed, her hands flicking switches and adjusting power levels.
Belongs to a hunter named Vike. He's the best.
Second best.
Gavin corrected, strapping into the co-pilot's seat. Vike was good. He herded them into a dense asteroid field, forcing Jet to focus on not becoming a smear on a rock. Plasma bolts tore past their cockpit. An impact rocked the ship, and the main engine coughed, sputtered, and died.
Main drive is offline, Marco yelled. The primary fuel injector is cracked.
We're dead in the water!
Koslov shouted, gripping her armrests.
Not yet,
Gavin said, unbuckling himself. He grabbed a heavy-duty wrench from a toolkit.
Jet, get ready to give me a hell of an EVA.
He turned to Marco.
Can you reroute auxiliary power to the aft magnetic clamps? Are you insane?
Foster's gasped.
Usually,
Gavin replied, clamping on a helmet.
Jet, when I give the signal, vent the main drive's plasma residue. It should give us a little push.
He cycled the airlock and lodged himself into the star-dusted black tethered to the ship. He scrambled across the hull as laser fire from the Silent Strike peppered the space around him. He reached the engine housing and pried open the emergency access panel. He locked his mag boots to the hull plating, the clang echoing silently. Bracing himself against the pull of empty space, he peered inside at the mess of smoking machinery. The injector was clearly fractured. He couldn't fix it, not from out here. He braced himself tighter.
Jet, now!
Venting! She yelled. A plume of incandescent gas erupted from a side port, sending the ship into a slow, clumsy spin. But it was enough. It bought him a few seconds. Gavin raised the wrench high over his head.
Applied kinetics,
he muttered, and brought it down with all his strength on the casing right next to the damaged injector. The impact jolted the entire assembly, and Newton's third law tried its best to send him flying, but his mag boots held firm. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of protesting metal, the cracked injector slammed back into a semi-functional alignment. Inside, Marco screamed with joy.
It's working! I've got a power feed! It won't last long, but it's working!
Gavin scrambled back to the airlock as Jet fired the main engine. The paper cut leaped forward, leaving a bewildered bounty hunter sitting alone in an asteroid field, probably wondering what kind of lunatic fixes a starship by hitting it with a hammer. They found a quiet corner of the galaxy to hide in, a nebula whose colorful gases played havoc with sensors. The adrenaline of the last few days finally faded, leaving a profound exhaustion in its wake. On the bridge, only Gavin and Koslov were awake.
You know, Koslov said, breaking the silence, when I was at the academy, they taught us that species like yours, like ours, were a galactic anomaly, too chaotic, too emotional, destined to burn out.
They weren't wrong about the chaotic part,
Gavin grunted, sipping his coffee.
No,
she said, a small, tired smile on her face.
But they were wrong about what it was for. All this time, I was trying to prove we deserved a seat at the table.
She gestured to the silent starfield outside the cockpit window.
It turns out we built the table, and the chairs, and the room they put it in.
She looked at him, a new hard-earned respect in her eyes.
Your methods are unorthodox.
That's a nice way of saying illegal and dangerous, Gavin said.
But effective,
she finished.
We may not agree on the how, but we're finally on the same page about the why.
In the small med bay, Dr. Foster sat alone in the dark, staring at the master index on his datapad. He wasn't looking at the grand revelations anymore. He was looking at the small file, a collection of human children's nursery rhymes that had been rebranded as the foundational meditation chants of a specific stoic rock people. He saw the text for Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and he began to weep. Not from sadness, but from the sheer, overwhelming weight of seeing a lifetime of ridicule transformed into the most important truth in the galaxy.
There's a problem,
Koslov announced the next morning, her diplomatic brain finally identifying a critical flaw in their plan.
We release this data. What happens? The curator order will claim the master index is a sophisticated digital forgery. They'll say we're trying to destabilize the galaxy with misinformation. They control the narrative. It will be our word against theirs.
Foster's face fell.
She's right. They've spent millennia building a reputation for infallibility. A single data file, no matter how comprehensive, won't be enough to shatter it.
He paced to the bridge.
We need something they can't deny. Something physical. Something ancient.
His eyes lit up. He dove into the data Marco had pulled, cross-referencing the master index with geological and archaeological surveys.
Here,
he said, pointing to a star map.
The ocean world of Aquaria. According to the index, one of their most sacred texts, the Aquarian prophecy, is stored in the High Temple of Glar. It sank centuries ago in a cataclysm.
So a waterlogged book?
Jet asked, unimpressed. Foster's grin was wolfish.
Not exactly. The sinking was a seismic event that plunged the temple into a deep-sea trench, but its structural integrity field held. It's in a pressurized, perfectly preserved bubble of its original atmosphere. And inside, held in a stasis field reliquary, is the prophecy, a carbon-datable first folio of William Shakespeare's collected works.
Getting the folio involved a borrowed mini-sub, a close encounter with a creature best described as a kraken with a bad attitude, and Marco having to bypass a temple lock based on tidal harmonics. But they got it. The book, sealed in its stasis case for centuries, was pristine. They had their proof, physical, undeniable, and utterly damning. From the relative safety of a smuggler's outpost, they packaged the data, the master index and high-resolution scans of the Shakespeare folio, and sent it on a tight beam transmission straight to the Sol system, to Earth's fledgling interstellar government. The response was faster and more terrifying than they could have imagined. It didn't come from Earth. It came from the Curator Order, broadcast on all galactic frequencies. High Archivist Ozimian's face appeared, his expression colder and more severe than ever.
The species known as human has been identified as a cultural contagion,
he announced, his voice echoing across 1,000 worlds.
Their chaotic mimetics threaten the stability and harmony of the Galactic Compact. As of this moment, their home system is under full quarantine, enforced by the Compact Defense Fleet under our direct command. No ships in or out. The criminals responsible for this blatant act of data terrorism are to be surrendered immediately. If they are not delivered to us within one rotation, the Sol system will be sterilized.
On the bridge of the paper cut, the 5 of them looked at each other in horror. This was no longer about getting credit for their work. This was about survival.
He's bluffing,
Jet said, though her voice lacked conviction.
No, he's not,
Koslov countered, her face grim.
He's a fanatic. We knew we had the fleet, but I never believed he'd use it like this. He would burn the galaxy to preserve his idea of order. We can't fight him. We can't win.
We don't have to win,
Gavin said, his voice cutting through the panic.
We just have to change the rules of the game.
He looked at Koslov.
You said it yourself. The curators control the narrative. So, let's give the galaxy a new story to read.
Using their combined skills, they crafted a new message. They sent it not to governments or official channels, but on the back-channel frequencies of the galactic underworld. To smugglers, pirates, mercenaries, and the disenfranchised colonies that the library had exploited for centuries. Koslov's voice, stripped of its diplomatic polish and filled with raw urgency, carried the message.
For generations, the Curator Order has sold you your history, your own culture, your own gods. They told you it was a gift. It was a theft. They are not shepherds. They are gatekeepers. They are pointing a gun at the head of the species that gave you the very words you use for freedom. They call humanity a contagion. We call it the source. The evidence is attached. Do with it what you will.
For a day, there was silence. Then, over the next standard week, the message spread like a digital plague. A single ship appeared on their long-range scanners, an old junk hauler from the Eridanus arm. Then another, a retrofitted pirate cruiser. A dozen outdated warships from a forgotten border conflict. A swarm of small, fast couriers. What began as a trickle became a flood. A fleet of junk, a rebellion born not of ideology, but of shared, simmering resentment, was assembling in the deep black. The capital of the Galactic Assembly was a wonder of orbital engineering, a shining beacon of order and law. That was about to change. The ragtag fleet didn't bother with strategic approaches or blockades. On jet signal, they all made a simultaneous, suicidal FTL jump, materializing directly in the capital's high orbit. It was glorious, beautiful chaos. The capital's defense fleet, expecting an orderly attack, was thrown into disarray. Junkers slammed into pristine cruisers, their captains cackling as they went down in a blaze of glory. Pirate ships opened fire on diplomatic transports. The battle was a distraction, a furious, desperate gambit. Through the heart of the fiery melee, the paper cut weaved like a silver needle.
They're too busy to notice one more ship on their scopes,
Jet yelled, adrenaline making her voice sharp and clear. She dodged debris and weapons fire, heading straight for the central assembly spire. They landed hard on a diplomatic landing pad, blasting their way into the spire's grand corridors. Alarms blared. Justicars, clad in white armor and moving with silent, inhuman grace, converged on their position. The fight was a running battle through halls of art and history, all of it stolen. Gavin laid down suppressing fire with his rifle. Jet used her agility to flank the Justicars, while Koslov, surprisingly, used her knowledge of the building's layout to lead them through service corridors. They reached the doors of the Grand Assembly Hall just as Ozimian himself appeared, blocking their path. He was alone. He held no weapon.
"You have failed," Ozimian said calmly. "Your noise and your chaos have accomplished nothing."
"We're not done making noise," Gavin growled, raising his rifle. Ozimian moved faster than anything Gavin had ever seen. He flowed forward, his hand striking the rifle and sending it spinning away. His stance was perfect, a textbook example of open-handed combat. He engaged Gavin, his movements a terrifying, flawless synthesis of 1,000 years of human martial arts. A Wing Chun block flowed into a Muay Thai elbow strike. A karate kick was followed by a judo throw. Gavin realized with a grim certainty, Ozimian wasn't just a librarian. He was the ultimate student. He hadn't just read about humanity. He'd studied its every move. Gavin was outmatched. He was a brawler, not a master. Ozimian pressed his advantage, landing blow after blow. As Ozimian raised a hand for a final decisive strike, Marco, cowering behind a pillar, shouted, "His stance! It's pure Krav Maga! Defensive and aggressive! Go for the knees! There's no honor in it!" Gavin, grunting, changed his tactics. He dropped low, sweeping Ozimian's legs. The curator stumbled, surprised by the dirty move.
"He's using a legionary shield bash form with his left arm,"
Fosters yelled, peering over the edge of the podium he was hiding under.
"It's powerful, but he's over-reliant on the follow-through. He'll be off balance for a split second after he strikes."
Ozimian came at him again, his left arm raised. Gavin took the blow on his shoulder, staggering back, but just as Foster's predicted, the curator overcommitted. In that single fleeting moment of imbalance, Gavin drove his fist straight into Ozimian's solar plexus. The air went out of the High Archivist in a whoosh. As he gasped, Gavin delivered a single, brutal, and entirely human knockout blow to the jaw. Ozimian crumpled to the floor. Just as the High Archivist fell, Marco, who had been frantically typing on his datapad while plugged into the hall's podium, screamed, "Done!" The huge holographic screens in the assembly hall, which had been showing images of the chaos outside, flickered. They all went dark for a second. Then they came to life. Not just in the hall, but on every public broadcast system across the known galaxy. The image was of the curator's own secret master index, its contents scrolling for all to see. The broadcast cut to a Hesperian warlord on his battlecruiser, staring at his holy Kantos on a screen. Beside it, the text from Sun Tzu's The Art of War scrolled in perfect sync. The warlord's face, a mask of warrior piety, began to crumble with dawning horror. It cut to the now surfaced temples of Aquaria, where the Aquarian priests watched holographic projections of actors on a wooden stage performing Hamlet. The words of their sacred prophecy were being spoken in a human tongue they had never heard, yet somehow understood. It cut to a smuggler's moon, to a cantina very much like the one on Tortuga Port. A grizzled pirate captain watched the screen, her crew silent around her. The broadcast was showing how the star charts they used, the ones sold to them by the curators as divinely inspired, were based on the celestial maps of ancient Babylon. A slow, dangerous grin spread across her face. The lie was broken. The galaxy had been given a new story, and it was a page-turner. In the aftermath, with the curator order shattered and 1,000 civilizations re-examining their entire existence, Ambassador Anya Koslov stood at the grand podium in the assembly hall. The chamber was filled with stunned delegates from every major species. She looked at them, no longer an envoy begging for scraps, but the representative of the galaxy's silent partner.
"We were told we were children raging in our crib,"
she said, her voice clear and strong, carrying to every corner of the room.
"It's true. We rage, we weep, we laugh, we fight, and we create. We are a species of storytellers. We built fires to stay warm in the dark, and then we used the light of those flames to tell stories to each other. Stories of heroes and monsters, of love and loss, of what we are and what we dream of becoming."
She paused, letting the words sink in.
"Those stories are now yours. That fire is now yours. We give it freely, a gift from one species of dreamers to another. But the next time you are tempted to dismiss a child for playing with fire,"
she said, her eyes sweeping across the assembly,
"remember who taught the galaxy how to burn."
The story ended, but a new one was beginning. Pardons were issued. The blockade of Sol was lifted, replaced by a flotilla of alien ships arriving not as conquerors, but as pilgrims. And on the orbital station of the Galactic Library, a massive new wing was under construction, its archways of woven fiber and polished moonstone catching the starlight. A new name was being etched above the grand entrance, the Earth Archives. A few weeks later, Gavin, Jet, Marco, Fosters, and Koslov walked through those gates. They weren't sneaking in this time. The doors slid open for them. They walked down the grand concourse, past aliens who nodded to them with a new kind of respect, a mixture of awe and a healthy amount of fear. They walked in like they owned the place, because now they did.